Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail. Today we are going to share parked truck driver horror stories. First story. There's a reason most truckers don't stop for hitchhikers. You know how in college or when you're just dirt poor, you come to enjoy certain shit foods? Like ramen, microwave burritos, cheap frozen pizza. I figure it's the same principle with long-haul drivers and truck stops. I'd only been on the road for 2 years before, and I'd only be on it for another 3 after, but I'd already grown a taste for greasy sausages and bad coffee. This time I couldn't enjoy the crappy meal on account of the man sitting 2 booths over. His appearance and clothes were normal enough, if a bit underdressed for the Colorado winter. I think it was the way he stared, scanning the room like the damn Terminator, that creeped me out. And all he had in front of him was an untouched cup of decaf. I usually savored these little breaks, but this time I hurried to finish. Partly to beat the weather, and partly to get out from under those eyes. Before the waitress came with my check, the man took a seat in the booth across from me without asking. "You a trucker?" He had one of those accents that's impossible to place. "Yeah. Would you allow me to ride with you?" he said with an off-putting smile. "What? To anywhere? You some sort of drifter?" "I have been for some time, but I'm heading home now. I haven't been home in so long." "Shit. You don't even know where I'm going." He blinked at that, the first time I'd seen the gesture from him. Then his smile widened. "Oh, going over Vail Pass." "Yeah, to Junction. And then Salt Lake." I knew this wasn't the 60s and big rigs weren't held up by the mob anymore. Even still, I figured if he asked where I was headed next, I'd lie. "You're definitely going where I need to go. I'd very much appreciate a lift." "I'd like to help." That was a lie. "But I'm not really supposed to pick up hitchhikers." "Company vehicle C." I'm not sure how long the waitress had been there, but enough, I suppose, 'cause she leaned in and whispered, "Please take him out of here. I'll comp your meal, but he's been here all day, eyeing me funny." "Please." Never have learned how to say no to women, so I sighed and told the stranger to follow me. "What's your name?" I asked as he took a seat. He shifted his weight and said, "We don't need to know each other's names." Then added, "Call me whatever you'd like." "Fine by me," I said, not curious a whit about his name or story. I had a piece of jerky on the dash. "How about Jim?" "If you'd like." "Sorry," I said after a few chilly minutes of uncomfortable silence. "The heater doesn't work all that great." "It'll be nice to get home," he said. "It's so much warmer than here." About that time, the snow started coming down real thick, and I cut my speed in half. Another rig, thick chains on the tires, was tearing down the mountain, clearly none too happy to be stuck behind me. I took the next pull-off, and the driver flashed his hazards and thanks. "What are we doing?" asked Jim, after the familiar hiss of the air brakes quieted. "Checking the weather report. Strapping up the wheels, maybe?" Said Jim, his smile gone and brow creased. Then he nodded. "All right. I suppose that'll be fine." I hadn't asked his opinion, but whatever. My phone was lucky to get any service, but I got my answers. Snow was expected to come in waves for several more hours. On this mountain, weather like that had been the end of more than one long hauler. I wasn't desperate enough for cash to risk it. "I hate to do this to you, Jim," I said sincere. 4 or 5 hours parked with my new friend did not sound fun. "But we're stuck here." "We don't look stuck. I just mean it wouldn't be safe to keep driving." I'll help you put the chains on," Jim said, his smile back. "Nah, sorry, I don't push it going downhill on a snowy mountain. But I need to get home. It's just a few hours." He shook his head. Empty smile once again vanished. "You don't understand. If we don't go now, I won't make it home until who knows when. It's a place, man. It isn't going anywhere." Jim paused. "Yes, it isn't going anywhere." At least we agreed. His eyes followed a van with a driver apparently braver than myself. "You wishing you'd hitched a ride with him?" I asked, and he squinted, then almost like he was trying to read the license plate. "No, they aren't going where I'm going." "That's too bad then, but I'll still be headed toward your home after the weather clears." "No, you won't." I shivered, and I don't think it was the cold. "Don't you have a job to do?" said Jim. I started to get angry then, or maybe he was afraid, but I was shaking either way. "Look, I can handle my own business, Jim. Nothing in this trailer is perishable. If I'm a little late, I'm a little late." "No," he shouted, and I swear for a moment his face barely looked human. "I insist you drive now." He was like a small child, throwing a tantrum. "All right, that's enough," I said, hand ready to dart for the glove box where I kept my Magnum. But I swear Jim's eyes bore right through the plastic, and he knew that I was packing. "Okay," my voice cracked. "I don't like doing this, but you're freaking me out. I need you to leave. Now!" My eyes not leaving my passengers, my right hand still ready to grab the gun, I used my left to fish around for a bag, a bottle of water, my spare coat, and a few sticks of jerky. I tossed it all on Jim's lap. "The diner's only a couple miles back. Just stay off the shoulder, and you should be fine." He just stared, motionless. I almost wished he would explode again. "This is my truck. I'm telling you to leave." "I won't need these," he said, dropping the coat and bag but taking the jerky from my dash. He didn't seem angry anymore. Sad, maybe. And then he hopped out. "Wait, it's 10 degrees, I yelled. Grabbing the gun and coat, I darted outside, wincing at the wind. There was no sign of Jim, and his track stopped after 10 feet or so. I considered calling out, but I guess I was too relieved. Maybe that makes me a shit person. I don't know. But I got back in the cab, locked both doors, kept my revolver handy, and didn't sleep a wink until Grand Junction 10 hours later. Now, I'm sure he was just some lunatic I picked up at a diner. I know that. But sometimes on snowy March nights, I can't help but wonder. Sometimes I wonder. Second story. I used to drive a delivery truck until the incident. 2. Harry, my oldest nephew on the cusp of adulthood and looking for his first job. "I've been told you want to drive a truck and are looking for me to give you a good recommendation to my former employer. I'm sorry to say I will not do that. Now, before you get angry or hurt, please listen to why and judge for yourself if you really want to pursue this avenue. I used to drive a delivery truck for a car parts company. It wasn't a bad job. I spent a lot of time alone with my thoughts while driving to various garages to deliver parts. I also listened to a lot of audiobooks as I drove. It was a wonderful way to pass the time. I could get totally immersed in a book as I was driving endless boring miles. I never considered myself to be much of a troublemaker. I would go along to get along, as they say. Working for just above minimum wage while driving on icy roads to the middle of nowhere garages was what I did all the time. I didn't complain about it much, at least not to the boss. But I did my job and I thought I did it well. Apparently, not everyone agreed. One day I came to work and was shown the new addition to my truck. There was a small box that hung down under the rearview mirror. I asked what it was and they told me it was a camera. What they didn't tell me was it was actually 2 cameras, one facing out toward the road and one facing in toward the driver. They were being installed to make sure the drivers were doing their jobs. Now I had worked for the company for years without a single ticket. I never had any complaints from any of my customers, and I never put a scratch on any of the trucks I drove. So, naturally, I took this camera situation as a personal incitement on my driving and on my moral character. I wasn't the only one who wasn't happy about it, but the company's stance was essentially, get over it. This was back when jobs were harder to come by, and the company said if we didn't like it, we were welcome to get the hell out. Those of us who needed to pay bills and feed our families decided to keep working and earning a paycheck. After a few months, we mostly forgot the cameras were there and went back to doing what we do, keep our mouths shut and deliver parts. Like we had a choice. The cameras weren't the end of the world as we thought. There were a few write-ups, but they were stupid people doing stupid things. Me, I followed the rules and didn't have any problems. I did what I was supposed to and didn't do what I wasn't supposed to. I know that's a strange concept in today's world. That changed the day the boss told me I was being written up for having a passenger with me. He recited the rule number in the handbook that clearly stated that no passengers are to be in company vehicles unless approved by a supervisor. I asked him what he was talking about and told him I didn't have any passengers. He told me that the main office had a video of me carrying a passenger with me. He even quoted the date and time of the offense. I thought back and racked my brain trying to remember if I had stopped and picked someone up on that day. And then I remembered I've never stopped and picked anyone up because I know it's against the rules. I thought about getting angry and raising a fuss. I thought about telling them that this was precisely the kind of harassment I expected would happen when these damn cameras were installed. Then I remembered their stance of, shut up and deal with it or we'll find someone else who will. The thought made me calm down and let it slide. I chuckled. Someone must have gotten videos and names mixed up. I thought, no big deal. I know the truth. I shrugged it off and threw the write-up away when I got it. My boss told me it didn't really mean anything anyway. Only major infractions were going to be disciplined. I wondered why he had even told me about it if it didn't mean anything. Driving in traffic and on snow-covered roads in winter was stressful enough without worrying about the main office saying I did something I didn't do. The following week I got another write-up, once again for having a passenger. I told the boss I hadn't had any passengers. I told him I follow the rules and he knows that. Again, he told me the main office had a video of me driving with someone in the passenger's seat. At this point, I was starting to get upset. Being accused of something I did was one thing, but being accused of what I've never done and getting written up for it was just too much. I asked the boss to see the video. He pulled it up on the computer. I watched as he worked through the controls, confident that I was going to find the mistake or the name of the person who had actually committed the infraction and clear my name. But that didn't happen. He pulled up the video, and sure enough, there I was driving along, and in the passenger seat was a large middle-aged man just staring out the windshield like he was along for the ride. My mind was having trouble comprehending what I was seeing. When I pulled myself out of my shocked stupor, I asked the boss what the date was when this happened. He told me, and I racked my brain to come up with an answer to this. I peered closer at the screen to make sure I was the driver. There was little doubt it was me. I was wearing the gray sweatshirt I wear when I drive. I had one hand on the wheel, the other leaning on the window, just like I do when I'm bored. I was wearing my ball cap with the logo of my favorite baseball team. It was me. If only I could figure out who this other person was and what was happening to me. Was I forgetting things? Was I having blackouts and not knowing it? How could this person be in my truck without me knowing? It's not like he was some stowaway hiding amongst the parts in the back. He was sitting 3 feet away from me. That person wasn't there, I told the boss. The camera says he was, the boss said. I don't know what to tell you. I wish I could believe you. You've been one of my best drivers, but we're starting to get into repeat offenses. The company is going to take action soon. Take action against what? I said a little louder than I intended. There was no one there. I don't know who has it out for me or who is playing this little Photoshop trick to get me in trouble, but I swear on a stack of Bibles that man was never in my truck. I don't know what to tell you, he said. I thought crossed my mind, can you see where I pick him up? I said. The boss eyed me. You said I have him in my truck. I must pick him up somewhere. Can you tell me where? He looked at the computer and began rewinding the video. The miles rolled backward, and the man just sat there watching the windshield. Then suddenly he disappeared. He stopped the video and ran it forward at normal speed. I came to a stop sign, and the man jumped in. "Pause it," I said. "Where is that?" He looked at the GPS information that was embedded in the video. "The corner of Hamilton and Wright." "What's there?" I said. He looked at the map. "Nothing." I leaned over and saw the same thing. There was nothing around there for at least a half mile. "That's on my normal Thursday route, isn't it?" "Looks like." I sat back and thought. He shot me a grim look. "You know this is out of my hands." I stared at him, shocked that this falsehood was going to end up costing me my job. "You're my boss," I said. "How can it be out of your hands?" "The main office wants to make an example." "Out of me?" He nodded slowly. "Should I be updating my resume?" I said. "I would if I were you." I got up, hung my head, and turned to walk away, then paused. "Would you do me a favor?" I said. He looked at me skeptically. "Depends on what it is. Could you call the main office and ask the person who monitors the trucks to call me if this ever happens again?" The boss rubbed his chin as he thought. "I guess that could be doable." I nodded and started toward my truck to load for my run. As I drove away from the terminal, my eyes kept darting toward the passenger seat, as if I was somehow missing someone climbing into the truck and sitting beside me. That was the way my entire run went that day. I was so distracted, I nearly rear-ended a car at a stop sign. I looked over and the sign said I was at the corner of Hamilton and Wright. I looked to see what was there and didn't immediately see anything. I leaned forward to see what was beside me and paused. There was a small graveyard. It wasn't big enough to register on the map. There were maybe 30 gravestones altogether. It didn't even have a fence around it. I was pulled from my thoughts by the car behind me honking their horn. I pulled out and started down the road, lost in the thoughts that were chasing each other around my head. A graveyard, I thought. There's no one I can see. Could it be a... I didn't want to finish the thought. I was never into that kind of thing and never really believed in it. When the phone rang, I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Hello," I said. "This is Carl. I monitor the cameras in the trucks. Look, I know I nearly hit that car, but I'm just a little distracted today." "What?" "No, that's not why I'm calling." "Okay. You just bored and needed to talk to someone?" "No. Your boss told me to call you when I saw you with a passenger." "Yes, so?" I said, looking over at the empty space beside me. "You have a passenger." My entire body turned to ice. "Say that again," I said. "You have a passenger," he said. I stared at the empty seat. "Where?" I said. "He's sitting in the passenger seat, right beside you," he said, sounding a little annoyed. "Carl," I said, "that can't be right. There's no one beside me." "That's not true," he said, his voice rising. I can see him plain as day. He's wearing a red ball cap, overalls, and a plaid shirt. I was staring at the seat. When I looked back at the road, there was a truck stopped in front of me. I stood on the brakes hearing them scream in protest, but not slowing my truck enough. I knew I was going to hit him. I swung the wheel over as hard as I could, feeling the truck start to tip, then swung back as I slid to a stop on the berm of the road. I looked at the truck sitting beside me, breathing hard, not only from the accident I'd just avoided, but also from the news Carl had given me. "Okay, Carl," I said in a lower voice as if I didn't want my imaginary passenger to hear. "What is my so-called passenger doing?" "He's just staring straight ahead." "I'm going to try something," I said. "Tell me what he does next." I hesitated for a moment, then reached my hand slowly across to the passenger's seat. I waved it back and forth in the empty air. As I did, my hand felt cold, as if I had just stuck it into a freezer. "Oh my God," Carl said. "What's happening?" "Your hand. It's passing right through him. It feels cold." "Wait a minute," Carl said. "He's doing something." "What?" "He's looking at your hand." I immediately pulled my hand back. What's he doing now? He's looking straight at you. I felt the blood drain out of my face. Holy shit, Carl screamed. Get out of there! Get out now! I fumbled with the door latch, somehow forgetting how to open a door. When it opened, I tumbled out of the truck. I looked back inside, still not seeing anything, when I put my phone back up to my ear. Now wah was all I was able to get out before my world went dark. I woke to a white room, beeping machines, and hoses stuck in my arm. I looked around the room and saw a bouquet of flowers that were starting to wilt. A nurse walked into the room with a syringe in her hand. Where am I? I rasped, causing her to jump. Oh my God, you scared me, she said. Why? Because you've been in a coma for 3 weeks. What happened? Don't you remember? She said. I slowly shook my head. You pulled over on the side of the road and jumped out of your truck right into traffic, she said. You got hit by a car and sustained several life-threatening injuries. Am I okay now? You should really talk to the doctor about that, she said. Please, I rasped, grasping her hand. She looked around as if someone was listening, then leaned close to my ear. As far as I know, you should make a full recovery, she said. They just aren't sure about your mental state. Why? I heard you were babbling on about seeing things when you first came in. Like what things? Like a go. How's the patient? An authoritative voice said. The nurse straightened and backed away. He's awake and seems to be progressing, the nurse said, straightening her uniform. Good, good, the doctor said. Let's see how you do in a day or so. Maybe we can have a little talk about when you first came in. I nodded and tried to fake a smile. The following day, I received an unexpected visitor. He was a small man, not too far out of his teens by his appearance. He knocked quietly at my door and started to turn around to leave when I said, Can I help you? Yeah, maybe, I don't know, he said. Okay, let's start with who are you? Oh, sorry, he said, stumbling forward and nearly falling on top of me as he held out his hand. I'm Carl. I shook it slowly. Carl, I repeated. Like Carl from the company? He smiled. Like Carl who told me to jump out into traffic and nearly killed me. I said, tightening my grip. He winced and wormed his way out of my grip. Yeah, about that, he said. Sorry, by the way, but I wanted to explain. Explain what? I said, sitting up, so I might get another chance at him. This, he said, holding up his phone. It's a phone, I said sarcastically. I've seen them before once or twice. I'm sure, he said, but it's what's on the phone that you need to see. Okay, what's on it? He fiddled with the phone for a moment, almost dropping it twice, then turned it toward me. What am I looking at? I said as the screen shook. Give it a minute. The screen settled down, and I saw it was a recording of me in the truck. I was mesmerized at the sight of the person sitting next to me. I watched as I waved my hand back and forth through his torso. I saw him look at my hand, then look at me. His face suddenly changed. His smile turned malevolent as it grew impossibly large. The grin extended nearly to his ears, and his teeth grew 3 inches to where he looked like a shark about to attack. His fingers grew into claws, and his eyes disappeared into his head, turning as black as the abyss. I saw him reach for me as I fumbled with the door latch, and he swiped his claws at me as I fell out of the door. He leered out the driver's side window at me, but stayed in the truck and slowly faded away. When Carl pulled the phone away, sweat was pouring off my forehead. I looked him in the eye and said, I forgive you. He smiled and said, You're welcome. We sat in silence for a long moment. What did the company have to say about that video? I said, It was deleted off the server the following day, he said. So that's the only copy? Yep, he said, holding up his phone. Do me a favor? Sure, what is it? Delete it. Are you sure? This is the proof that you weren't lying. I'm sure. I don't ever want to see that thing again. I quit driving a truck for a living after that. I never again drove past the corner of Hamilton and Wright. I'll go miles out of my way to avoid it. I suggest you do the same. Third story. I'm a delivery truck driver who saw something weird and unexplainable. This experience happened to me last year, and I've decided after much deliberation to post it here. So, I work as a delivery driver for a company that deals in your big household utensils. You know, fridges, cookers, things like that. I don't want to give any details on the company or the employer, but I'll just say I'm based in the Missouri area. Before I begin, just a little backstory on me. I'm an expat from Liverpool, England, which will explain my spelling. Sorry, no matter how long I've lived in the States, I refuse to take the U out of color. I met my lovely wife 8 years ago when she was on holidays and we hit it off. After a year of long distance back and forth, I finally made the jump and moved to the US to be with her. And we've been happily married ever since. Anyway, my job often involves long hours on the road, sometimes late into the night. There was me and a young kid. We'll call him Pete, and he's the boss's son. We got along well enough even though we don't have anything in common. Pete's your typical 20-something kid, usually glued to his phone. I'm in my 40s, so yeah, what can you do? We don't even like the same sports. He's into his baseball. I'm still a die-hard Liverpool fan. But we used to shit-talk a lot on the road, and it makes the job easier on deliveries to have two people doing the lifting instead of one. So it's near the end of October last year, and myself and Pete are just finishing up for the day when I get a call from the boss man. He tells me to head back to the pickup for one last order. This isn't anything new, mind you. Logistics is a mess at the company sometimes. When I hang up, Pete flips his lid as usual, and I take it in my stride. Pete starts going off on his dad about how things are a mess at the company and that if he were running things, there'd be no last-minute deliveries. I just mind my business as usual. It wasn't the first time I'd heard the spiel. Pete's dad had put him on deliveries to teach him the value of good work while he was completing a business degree at night classes in college. Problem was he often missed those classes when we were called for some late-night duties. I could understand the kid's frustrations. So we head back to the store and pick up a large refrigerator all packed neatly in a cardboard box, then load it onto the truck. I got the location up on the phone, and we set off for the long drive. Pete was still pissed because he had some drinking plans with some friends that night, so he was mute for the hour journey. I put on the radio and just chilled before calling the wife, letting her know to put the dinner in the micro. So there we are on these pitch-dark back roads out in the sticks. I'm glancing at the phone every so often, noting that we're getting closer to our destination. We hadn't seen a house in ages, and I was getting antsy that maybe the directions were wrong. Sure enough, the phone lets me know that we had reached the end of the line. I slowed down, peering out the windscreen at the dark country lane, completely covered with trees on both sides, the only light coming from the truck's headlights. I crawl to a stop, and Pete glances up from his phone. He looks at me and asks what's going on. I tell him we've reached our destination. Oh, for fuck's sake, don't tell me Dad gave us the wrong directions. He starts going off on his dad again, and I tell him to settle down. I was annoyed myself, but I didn't want to hear another bout. Pete just shrugged and settled back to gazing at his phone, muttering to himself. I called the boss and let him know the situation. He assured me they were the right directions and tells me to call the client. I take a look at the docket and get the number, enter it on the phone, and hit dial. No answer. I try again, and still no answer. Pete gets out of the truck telling me he has to take a piss. I watched him walk into the dark edge of the road and call the boss again. He tells me that I need to make that delivery, otherwise we'll be behind for the rest of the week. Then instructs me to keep trying to call the client and to drive up the road to see if we can find the house. I mumbled a half-hearted, yeah, and hung up. Even tough these late-night, last-minute deliveries were a regular occurrence. I never considered leaving the job. The boss is a decent enough fella, even if a little scattered. And the pay is good as well as the holiday leave. So I'm waiting in the truck for a while when I realize there's no sign of Pete. I get out and call his name. No answer. I tried looking into the pitch dark, but couldn't see shit. I called out for him again, and still nothing. I was getting slightly worried and decided to walk down the road a bit, the truck's engine humming steadily behind me. I shout, "Hey Pete, stop messing around." He finally answers, and I let out a sigh of relief. Last thing I wanted was losing the boss's son in the middle of nowhere. I saw the white of his t-shirt under his open jacket jog up the road towards me. I asked him what the fuck he was doing. He points at a faint light through the trees behind him. I saw that light and thought it might be the place, so I walked down the road to see if there's a way in. I found a gate in behind some buses below. We get back in the truck, and I reverse it down the road. He points me to the gate. Sure enough, it's tucked back in behind a sharp turn, almost invisible. No wonder we hadn't seen it on the way up. We both had the same look on our faces, saying, "This must be it." After some tricky maneuvering, we're heading up a patchy gravel drive. Some of the tree branches were so thick and bowed, we could hear them scraping off the top of the truck. A few minutes later, the house comes into view. It was an old house that you'd think was abandoned, if not for the lights coming from inside. It had one of those surrounding porches that you'd see in the rich suburbs. The wooden boardings on the walls were all flaked and peeling like they'd never seen a lick of paint. Some old work sheds stood off to the side, doors fastened shut. The only thing out of place was a nice-looking expensive car that was parked in the drive, which meant to me that someone must be home. I swung the truck around and backed it up to the front door, then shut off the engine. We got out and I told Pete to get the fridge on the trolley. While he opened the back and went to task, I walked up to the front door, the decking creaking under my boots, and gave it a sharp knock. I waited for an answer in what would have been a still, quiet night, if not for the noise of Pete bringing the fridge down on the mechanical ramp. I knocked again and waited some more. Pete made his way over to the steps leading up onto the porch, trolley in hand. "Maybe they're not home," he said. "There's a car here, and the lights are on." I replied, "So? What if there's something wrong? This place is creepy as fuck." I shook my head and smiled. Before that day, I didn't go in for all that stuff. It wasn't the first time I had to make my rounds out in ass-crack nowhere, and I was used to so-called creepy houses in the night. But not after that night. I was about to knock for a third time when I heard movement from inside. I turned to Pete and gave him a wink, saying, "Here we go." The door opened, and a young, slight woman was standing in front of us. She was pale and sweaty, with her long, dark hair tied in a bun. She was wearing this striped black and pink jumper. That's a detail I'll never forget. It was just so odd. Actually, her whole demeanor was odd from the get-go. She looked like she was sick, like she was just getting over the flu or something. I put on my best smile and told her we were there to deliver her fridge, apologizing for the late call. She stared at me, confused. I showed her the docket and confirmed the address and name. She looked back up at me with her dark eyes, and the confused look left her face. "Oh yeah, I forgot that was today. Sorry. Come in." She stood aside, and I helped Pete get the fridge up the steps. Inside, the house was well kept, but a little old-fashioned with a faint musty smell. A few pictures hung on the walls of a little girl and an older woman, which I guessed must have been her with her mother. There were also some various aged photos of her mother, looking younger and holding a baby, surrounded by groups of other people, in what must have been a large camp in some woods. Don't know why that detail comes to mind, but there you go. Certainly adds to the weird shit that went down in that house when I think about it. She led us into the kitchen, and I asked if she wanted us to take the old fridge away. It's part of the service we provide. She said yes, and we got to work unplugging the old model. You don't mind emptying it, do you? She quietly said. There's not much in it. I opened the door, and sure enough, it was pretty much empty. No bother, miss, I told her. As I took out the few meager items, Pete started unboxing the new fridge. All the while, she's just standing there, looking at us silently while scratching her arm. Eventually, she's rocking back and forth on her feet, looking jittery. Will you excuse me? She said quickly. Without waiting for an answer, she took off down the hallway. Pete gave me a look and whispered, She's a strange one. I think she's using. I whispered back, What? Drugs, heroin, you know? See her scratching her arm? She's all sweaty and sick. I've seen similar types of behavior before when a drug user is looking for a fix. Oh shit, I think you're right. Pete replied. Let's just get this done quick. I said. We put the new fridge in place and heaved the old one onto the trolley in no time. There was no sign of the woman as we headed back outside to load it into the truck. I told Pete to lock it up, and I went back inside to get her digital signature on the pad. I called for her, but there was no answer. I went to the kitchen, and she wasn't there either. On the way back to the front door, I spotted an open door up a short hallway. Now, I'm not one to go snooping around someone's house, but I'm also a stickler for procedure, if not for covering my own as more than anything else. I don't want some asshole claiming they never got their item and putting me in the shit while I try to prove they did. So I just wanted to get the signature in a long night and go home. I made my way up to the door and saw that it led down to the basement. I could see a faint light coming from below. Mississippi, are you down there? I said in a somewhat loud voice and waited in the silent house. I then heard something like radio static drift up from the basement. Maybe she didn't hear me. I thought. Maybe she's listening to music or something, which is why she didn't hear us knocking at first. And then, or maybe she's using. The whole situation felt out of place, if you get what I mean. Still, I began to make my way slowly down the steps and repeated myself in a louder voice. To be honest, even I was starting to get a little creeped out. I jumped when I heard Pete whisper behind me. What's going on? I think she's down here, I said quietly. Let's just go, he said in a worried voice. I put up a front, smiled at him and said, What? You afraid of that little girl? He gave me a look telling me he didn't care what I thought. I think he knew I was uneasy too. What if she's shooting up or something? Hardly, I replied. She wouldn't be that stupid to do that while we're in the house. I was trying to rationalize that idea to myself rather than Pete. Still, I motioned us down and called for her again. Still no answer. As we reached the end of the steps, the static noise was louder. There was a closed door in a small hallway to our left leading to the rest of the basement. I was about to knock on it when I heard what sounded like a young girl's voice talking through the static. I looked back at Pete, and his eyes were wide. Then we heard mumbling coming from the strange woman. It sounded like she was talking to the little girl. I mouthed at Pete, What the fuck? He was busy looking back up the steps, obviously ready to sprint at the first sign of trouble. I went to open the door, and he grabbed me by the shoulder, shaking his head no. Maybe she's talking to someone over a radio or something? I whispered. Just forget the signature, he replied quickly. We're just freaking ourselves out at this stage, Pete, I said abruptly, trying to get a handle on the situation. With that, I knocked on the door and opened it saying, Miss? What I saw in that room below that old house will stay with me for the rest of my life. It was the freakiest shit I've ever seen, and believe me, growing up on the mean streets of Liverpool, I've seen some shit. Homeless people beating the crap out of each other over newspaper. A guy stabbed in the neck on a night out. But this one topped them all. The woman was sitting on this large steel plate with her back to us, which was attached to some kind of huge weird machine. There was what looked like a speaker system suspended in the middle of it with antenna on top. Coming out of the plated sides were all these flexible tubes with needles on the end of them, lying on the floor like still tentacles. All except one which was inserted into her arm. She was in this deep trance-like conversation with a little girl's voice coming out of the speaker. I can't remember what they were saying because I was in shock. Pete stood still beside me, mouth open. In that moment, my mind was all over the place because I couldn't even understand what I was seeing. But the bit that gets to me, that still makes my skin crawl to this day, is what happened next. Suddenly, the little girl's voice goes quiet through the static, and the woman does too. I could hear my heart beat violently in my ears. After a moment, the girl in the speaker says, "Those two are watching us. Like, how the fuck did it know we were there? Was there cameras or what? Not that I can remember, and I can still see that place vividly when I close my eyes. There was this screen thing on the machine thing, but it was off. I can still hear that exact phrase when I think on it. That sweet little girl voice speaking in a monotone way. Those two are watching us." The woman turned to look at us, her face covered in sweat, her skin a sickly pale. We stood still like a deer in headlights. Pete was shaking visibly. Poor lad. Then she looked pissed. She stood up and said in a firm, angry tone, "What the fuck are you doing?" We had no answer. Pete began to back out the door. Then she shouted, "What the fuck are you doing?" With that, she tore the needle tube thing off her arm, and the static cut out. There was blood running down her arm, mixed with this strange yellowish fluid. Pete bolted up the stairs, and the woman started walking towards me. "This is private," she shouted, pointing a bloody finger at me. I got my senses back quick at that and rushed up the stairs, signature be damned. I'm a big guy physically, but I was freaked out, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I wasn't afraid of her so much as I was afraid of the whole situation combined together, if you catch my drift. Behind me, I heard the door slam and her roaring from the other side. "Get the fuck out of my house." I was happy to oblige, and quickly swung the front door shut on my way to the truck. I jumped inside where Pete was waiting for me, fear in his eyes. I shakily got the keys out of my jacket pocket and started the engine. "Let's get the hell out of here," I said. Pete didn't reply, and I drove us down that narrow gravel drive as fast as I could, the tree branches bouncing noisily off the roof. I clipped the pier of the gate on the way out onto the road, but I didn't care. The boss could duck it off my pay. We didn't say anything for quite a while on the way back. Eventually Pete said, "What was that?" "I don't know, but I don't want to even think about it," I replied in a shaky voice. "Neither do I." Pete said, "We must have formed a silent agreement because we never mentioned it again on the rest of the drive back to the store or even after that. I've never even told my wife. I mean, who would have believed us anyway? It all sounds so crazy. At home base, we let on to the boss that it was just another normal delivery. I told him that I dented the bumper on the gate because it was such a tight turn, which was partially true. He informed me not to worry about it and thanked us for doing the job. As I said, he's a decent enough fella. Pete did a few more jobs with me after that, but eventually quit much to his dad's disappointment. I don't blame him. If I was a young lad, I'd have too. But I need this job. Last I heard, he left town to go to college full-time. Hope it all works out for him. I got paired up with an old hippie guy in his 60s. We got more in common, so there's that. I still do the odd late-night delivery, but not as much. I had a stern talk with the boss about cutting back on those shifts and wanting to spend more time with the wife. I do have questions, of course. Like, what the hell was that machine thing? What was that woman with her black and pink striped jumper doing with it? What was that little girl's voice? But what I said to Pete that night still holds true. I don't want to think about it. At least know too much. Still, though, when I do make that odd late-night run, that experience always plays at the back of my mind. Writing this down and getting my story out there is kind of like closure for me. I want to put the whole experience behind me. Update: September 8th. Don't know why I'm posting this here. I suppose it is an addendum in some way. Pete, not his real name, went missing in mid-August. At first we thought he'd bailed on college. My boss still thinks that, but I'm not so sure anymore. I think he's dead. Some of his friends on social media think it might have been suicide. If so, maybe what we saw that night had a greater effect on him than I originally thought. Also, my missus told me something that got me rattled last night. I don't know how we got to it, but she brought up an incident with a woman who called to the house around that time too, who was looking for me. Said it had to do with insurance or something. I pressed my wife for a description of some sort, and besides telling me she was wearing a smart suit, the woman was very sickly looking with dark hair and strange eyes. I had to suppress my shock and told her that I had no idea who it was. Anyway, my wife had completely forgotten about the whole thing because life was a little chaotic. We were helping with search parties for Pete, and it slipped her mind. If it was that same woman and she had something to do with Pete's disappearance, then I'll be honest, I'm starting to freak here. I'm thinking I should go to the cops, but I'm afraid they'll laugh in my face. Plus, that woman hasn't been seen around since, so what could they charge her with? For now, I'm just going to play it cool and carry on. Hopefully Pete shows up, one way or another, and maybe that woman calling was a coincidence. I never knew what she worked as. Maybe she was a door-to-door insurance person or something. Maybe I'm just thinking too much about this. Fourth story. I am a truck driver, and I will never forget the time I broke down at 4 in the morning. Being a trucker means constant travel. Constant travel means constant change, and constant change means constant danger. This was something I had to accept when I took the job all those years ago. But back then, I know that nothing would ever happen to me. There was no chance of me running into danger. I was completely invincible behind the wheel of my rig. But how was I wrong? I crossed the state border a while ago, and my eyes were starting to get heavy. I hadn't seen anyone else on the roads for miles, and I was getting bored of listening to chat show after chat show. Suddenly, the truck started slowing down. I put my foot down harder on the pedal, but it had no effect. I shook myself wide awake and sat up. My truck rolled a few more meters, then came to a halt. I just sat there for a minute, confused, before I unclipped my belt and climbed out. I quickly came to the realization that I had run out of fuel. I was pretty pissed at myself for not paying more attention, and thinking about it, I did hear the warning bleep some time ago. I was about to call my boss when I heard a voice from behind me. I span round real fast, holding my phone as if it were a weapon. The man slowly approaching me looked to be in his early 40s, with graying hair and a mustache. He seemed to be chewing a lump of tobacco and walking with a slight limp. "Looks like you've run out of gas," he croaked, still approaching me. I shrugged and told him that I'd fine and started to walk back towards the truck. "I got a place not so far from here where I could get you some fuel." I didn't believe him. Too many things didn't add up. Why was he out here at this location at this time, just as I broke down? I said that I already had some in the back, and I didn't need any help. I got in and locked the doors. I just wanted this man to go away. I saw him walk off into the tree line and disappear. I called my boss, and he said he'd sent someone out to tow me, but they might take some time. I ended up falling asleep where I sat, feeling much more secure with my doors locked and the man gone. I woke up some time later and realized that I was moving. I was confused at first, but then remembered that someone had been sent to tow the truck. I wondered why they didn't wake me up, but maybe they tried. I'm a deep sleeper and the doors were locked. I noticed that it was still dark outside and tried to work out where we were on the map. I couldn't see any signs along the side of the road and had no clue where I was. I opened the window and shouted round to the tower, "Where are we going?" Why hadn't he just taken me to the garage? After a while, we appeared to be on a very rural road, almost like we were driving through a forest. In the distance, there was a large barn we seemed to be heading towards. I couldn't get the attention of the tower, so called my boss to see what was going on. He sounded extremely puzzled and said the tower wasn't due to arrive at my location for another hour. I was losing it and shouted at "Why, boss, then who the hell is towing me?" My boss called the police and told me to try and get out of the vehicle. I didn't need telling twice, swung open the door, and jumped out. I was winded and lay there for a moment. The tow truck then stopped. The tower must have heard the sound of the door. I got up immediately and ran. I had no clue where I was and chose a random direction. Looking over my shoulder, I saw him and immediately recognized the face. It was the man from earlier. He spat a mound of tobacco out of his mouth and jumped out of the truck. I ran faster and faster, but then I heard the noise of a gunshot ring out. I hit the floor and crawled behind the nearest tree, terrified. The man was walking fast now and shouting for me to come out. He didn't see exactly where I went, but he probably had a pretty good idea. I managed to drag myself behind a log, breathing as quietly as I could. The man was getting closer, calling, "Turn yourself in and it'll be quick." I couldn't move anymore now. He would hear me. The man stopped right next to my log, looked around, and ran off in another direction. I breathed a sigh of relief and looked out. The man was about 100 meters away and looking right at me. I bolted for the truck and made it underneath, the sound of bullets slamming against the metal. I had nowhere to run, and he was here. Just as I thought it was all over, I heard the sound of sirens. The man swore and ran off into the wood. I climbed out from under the truck and met the officers that had arrived. 2 of them had already run off after the man. They asked me what had happened and took me back to the station for questioning. I answered all of their questions and told them about the barn I was being towed to. It was inspected and sealed off. When asking what they found, I was told that it was best I didn't know. I can only imagine what would have happened to me if I had stayed in the truck. However, I did know one thing. That man is still on the loose, and I can only pity the poor soul who runs into him next. 5th story. I am a truck driver, and something has followed me 200 miles across the mountains. I have not been posting lately as I was off on a haul for a while. Whilst on that, something happened to me. Something awful. I can hardly close my eyes anymore without worrying something from my past will come back to get me. What happened to me on my most recent haul has darkened my past even more. Whilst my mind tries to repress these things, it also tries to convince me that they are not over, and whoever has troubled me is coming back. I was taking my cargo through the mountains, no service on my phone, no reception on the radio, just the sound of nothing. It has been like this for miles, just me, my truck, and the road ahead. It was very refreshing, exactly what I needed after the trauma of my past years. I noticed the time and sped up. I wanted to be out of the mountains before dark, but at this rate, it wasn't looking likely. Some time went on, and I was busting for a piss. I pulled up and got out. I was finishing up when I noticed something in the not-so-far distance. This was the first time I saw it. A creature resembling a man, a large man. I was about to call out when I realized that something was wrong with his face. I slowly came to the realization that this wasn't a man at all. The shocking thing was, it wasn't any animal I'd seen before either. It stared straight at me. The 2-hour silence was finally broken by the loud cracking of twigs as this thing charged straight at me. I sprinted back to the van and got in. I immediately shoved the keys into the ignition. My peaceful trance had been snapped. I slammed down the accelerator, something I had to do way too much these days. As I began to roll off, I saw the thing burst from the tree line and onto the road behind me. I was picking up speed, but so was the creature. I finally made it to 20 kilometers per hour. I looked in the rear view mirror and saw the thing standing in the road, staring after me with a snarl on its face. If it was a face at all, this thing must have been a seriously disformed man. It had a human's body, but the stance of a wolf on its hind legs, its face much too big for a person. The eyes were not aligned, and the mouth had retreated too far up its face. I shook my head and drove on. Another thing for my mind to repress, and another thing to make my therapist tell me I'm crazy. I had covered a lot of ground and had almost made it out of the mountain range. Dusk had fallen hard onto the horizon, and I had almost forgotten about what I had seen. My radio began to crackle, meaning I was picking a reception, and it looked like my phone had a bar of signal. I was relieved, and in the first time in ages I smiled. The smile was ripped from my face as I looked out of my window. Upon a high-up rock to the side of me was the clear silhouette of the man. Its head turned and fixed on my truck. My heart sank down into my gut and continued its descent as I saw the thing jump off the rock and charge down the hillside towards me. How the hell had it made it this far? There was no possible way for the man to have gotten there on foot. My confusion ceased when I noticed how close it was to me. I sped up, building speed way too slowly. The man was close now, almost able to grab onto the side of the rig. I noticed a corner up ahead. In the wing mirror, I saw him about to jump onto the back. I turned the corner very sharply. The thing had missed its opportunity and bounded off into the hills. I drove on for many miles. The darkness had settled now. I realized that my radio had stopped crackling and my phone still had no signal. I was sure I was meant to be out of the mountains by now. I stopped, looked at my map, and immediately knew I had taken the wrong turn. I had followed the signposts and had taken the sign that had pointed to Main Road. I thought back and recalled that the sign had been pretty wonky and had been tipped upside down. I realized how much of a fool I had been. Obviously, it was the wrong road, as the sign its right way up would have pointed the other way. In all my fear, I hadn't batted an eyelid. Looking at my map, there was nowhere to turn round for miles. With a heavy sigh, I drove on. As I set off, I could have sworn I saw something in the trees. Along the road, I kept noticing something walking behind the tree line, but I only saw it every couple of miles. I didn't even want to think about what it was. After what seemed like the longest drive of my life, I had reached the turning point and began to swing the truck around. Once I was facing the right direction, I let out a whimper. It was standing in the road in front of me. I got a better look at him this time. It was a man. He was tall and very wide. His face, like I had noticed earlier, was extremely disformed. He began to walk at me very fast. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't wait there, and I couldn't reverse. I locked my door and drove forwards, hoping to scare him off. For a brief moment, I thought I did. He began to walk around the side. I then heard him climbing up the passenger side. I grabbed the keys from my pocket and locked the doors. In the same second, I heard the heart-wrenching tug on the handle. A split second later, and that thing would have been inside. I swore, and I drove. The man was pounding on the window now, extremely hard. Thud, thud, thud. This was the single most horrifying moment of my life. I don't know what I was thinking, but I wound down the window a small amount. The man instantly stuck his fingers through. I then wound the window up quickly. He screamed and pulled them out, falling onto the roadside. I carried on driving, not looking back once. I made it onto the main road, turned the radio up to full, and almost cried when I saw other cars. My phone had signal, and I called my boss, telling him what had happened. He didn't believe me, of course, and told me to take the next few days off, and that he'd book me an appointment with a therapist in the morning. I felt so safe back on the busy road and was the happiest I had ever been to see traffic in my life. I lay in my bed that night, running things over in my head. As I looked out of my window, I was almost sure I could see something watching me. Surprisingly, I went straight to sleep and didn't wake up for 16 hours. I would never be driving a mountain route again,